There is a quiet truth about money that no school teaches, no spreadsheet captures, and no investment chart fully reveals. Your financial life is not shaped by how well you understand economics, but by how deeply you understand yourself. This is the core pulse beneath the psychology of money, a book that at first glance appears to analyze wealth, yet ultimately becomes a mirror, reflecting the hidden forces that govern our choices, the forces we rarely admit yet always obey. And when you begin to see money through this lens, not as numbers, but as emotions clothed in numbers, the landscape of your decisions changes forever. Most people approach wealth as though it is a technical pursuit, something that belongs to the intelligent, the educated, the mathematically gifted. But Housel quietly challenges this belief by reminding us that people with PhDs go bankrupt while high school graduates build empires. Not because intelligence is irrelevant, but because money responds more faithfully to behavior than brilliance. What breaks or builds a fortune is not IQ. It is patience, restraint, empathy for your future self, and the rare ability to remain calm while everyone else panics. And that realization begins not with graphs, but with a story. Imagine two men living in the same city. One was a technical genius working for a prestigious firm. The other was a janitor, earning modest wages invisible to most. But life has a way of rewriting expectations. The genius died nearly broke, while the janitor quietly left an 8-figure fortune behind. Why? Because the first man believed wealth was something he could outsmart, while the second man believed wealth was something that grew quietly if he respected its silence. Compounding rewarded one and punished the other. Not because of talent, but because of temperament. That's when you begin to understand. Wealth is not the car you drive or the home you live in. It is the choices you don't see, the purchases you didn't make, the ego you didn't feed, the risks you didn't take just to impress someone who wouldn't notice anyway. But beneath every financial decision sits an emotional history. You don't invest with logic, you invest with childhood memories, with scars, with fears whispered by the people who raised you. Someone who grew up watching their parents lose everything in a recession learns to fear the stock market like a wildfire. Someone who grew up in a booming economy sees opportunity everywhere, sometimes to their advantage, sometimes to their ruin. Two people can look at the same data and feel two completely different storms inside. And that difference in experience becomes the difference in outcome. What Housel dares to reveal is that our lives are not long enough for us to experience every economic cycle. We form our worldviews based on the narrow slice of history we personally lived through. If you grew up after inflation stabilized, inflation feels like a myth. If you grew up after 2008, you feel the market can betray you at any moment. And because of this, we constantly underestimate how limited our perspective is. We trust our memory more than statistics, our fear more than probability, our anxiety more than any expert's reassurance. And so money becomes a battlefield not between rich and poor, but between our present self and our future self. One of the most haunting truths in the book is that wealth is what you don't see. The luxury lifestyle you admire is often a story of spending, not accumulation. People mistake looking rich for being rich, and in that confusion, they chase symbols instead of substance. Wealth, the real kind, is invisible because it hides in savings accounts, in investments, in decisions made at 2 a.m. When you choose security over impulse, it is the quiet confidence of someone who does not need to prove anything. And the irony is that society celebrates consumption and ignores compounding, the very force that determines who will still be wealthy decades from now. Another lesson pulses through the book like a heartbeat. Enough is a superpower. Most financial tragedies don't come from bad markets. They come from people who didn't know when to stop. When more becomes a drug, risk becomes invisible. You start pushing boundaries you once respected, believing you are immune to loss. But the world has a way of humbling those who never learned to define enough. It is not greed alone that destroys wealth. It is the inability to recognize sufficiency, the refusal to walk away from the table while you're still ahead. But perhaps the most liberating idea in the book is that reasonable decisions beat rational ones. Rational is cold, mathematical, detached. Reasonable is human-rooted in feelings, values, and peace of mind. And peace of mind is, ironically, one of the highest yielding assets you can own. You don't need perfect optimization. You need a strategy you can stick with when everything goes wrong. Losing sleep to chase an extra percent of return is a poor trade for a shorter, more anxious life. As the story unfolds, Hauser reminds us that risk and luck are siblings neither fully predictable, both quietly shaping our fate. A single lucky moment can elevate a lifetime. A single unlucky moment can erase years of effort. But acknowledging this should not make us bitter. It should make us humble. It should make us kinder in our judgments of others, gentler with ourselves, and far more grateful for the pieces of life that turned in our favor without us even noticing. And yet, beneath all these lessons lies a final truth. Money behaves like a living organism. It grows slowly, breathes uncertainty, responds to neglect, and rewards patience. You cannot push it, rush it, or bully it into maturity. You can only plant, protect, and wait. And waiting is a form of wisdom few people master, because the modern world teaches us to crave immediacy, while compounding teaches us to revere time. Time is the partner of the patient and the executioner of the impulsive. It is the invisible hand that either lifts or quietly punishes, depending on whether you respected its rhythm or tried to outsmart it. And when you finally understand this, you begin to see money not as a chase, but as a relationship that demands calmness during storms, humility during gains, and a deep acceptance that the future will always hold surprises, some generous, some cruel, but all reminding us that wealth was never just about numbers. It was about who we became while learning to hold our nerve in a world where uncertainty never sleeps, where hope and fear negotiate quietly in the background of every decision, and where the true mastery of money begins the moment you recognize that its most important battles are fought not in markets, but in the private, unlit corridors of your own mind as you try to understand why you reach for certainty in moments where certainty can never truly exist in the way we wish it would. And that is where the real journey toward financial maturity begins. Not with numbers, not with strategies, but with the courage to sit with uncertainty without letting it consume the architecture of your decisions. Because the truth is, money has never promised anyone safety. What it offers is possibility. And possibility, by its nature, is fragile. To live with money wisely is to live with that fragility without breaking under it. To understand that wealth is less about control and more about resilience, less about predicting tomorrow, and more about preparing yourself to withstand whatever form tomorrow chooses to take. And so, as you continue walking deeper into this landscape of financial psychology, you begin to recognize that the richest people are not those who own the most, but those who fear the least, not because they are naive, but because they have built a system around themselves meant to protect their mind first and their money second. This is where Housel's message becomes not just informative, but therapeutic. He asks you to imagine your future self as someone you owe a quiet debt to, someone who will one day wake up grateful or resentful, depending on whether you honored them during the years you still had time. Every dollar saved is not just compounding financially, it is compounding emotionally, adding layers of calmness to a life that will inevitably encounter storms. And the storms will come: recessions, job losses, unexpected tragedies, unpredictable turns that remind us that security is borrowed, not owned. But what you build today can become the shield your future self will someday cling to during nights when the world feels uncertain. One of the most gently devastating ideas in the book is the realization that people don't want money. They want freedom. They want space. They want mornings where they aren't rushed, choices where they are not cornered, and dignity that no boss or crisis can take away. Money is simply the tool that buys those things. And when you begin to see money as a vessel for autonomy rather than status, something shifts inside you. You stop asking, "How can I look successful?" And you begin asking, "How can I feel unthreatened by life?" That shift is the dividing line between chasing wealth and understanding it. But understanding does not guarantee perfection. Even the wisest investor is still human, still capable of panic when markets fall, still vulnerable to greed when everything rises. What separates the resilient from the reckless is not immunity to emotion, but awareness of it. An awareness that allows you to step back from the noise and ask a simple question. Will this decision make sense to the future version of me who knows more, feels calmer, and carries the lessons of years I have not yet lived? And if the answer is no, wisdom is often found in doing nothing. Housel reminds us that doing nothing is, paradoxically, one of the hardest skills in finance. We live in a world that worships movement, that mistakes activity for progress. But compounding is a quiet creature. It hates being touched. It grows best in stillness. And most fortunes are built not by people who constantly adjust, but by those who create a plan humble enough to survive their own emotions, and then hold that plan long enough for time to breathe life into it. As the narrative reaches its final arc, the book offers one more truth that lingers long after you close its pages. People don't fail financially because they are unintelligent. They fail because they underestimate the war happening inside themselves. The war between impulse and patience, between fear and logic, between ego and humility, between the desire to impress now and the desire to be free later. And it is in these invisible battles that the fate of a fortune is decided. Not in the markets, not in the economy, but in the quiet negotiations between who you are today and who you hope to become. When you step back and look at the full arc of the psychology of money, you realize it is not a book about wealth. It is a book about being human in a world where uncertainty is permanent, temptation is constant, and comparison is poison. It whispers to you that the goal is not to beat the market, but to build a life where money supports your purpose rather than distorting it. A life where you no longer chase admiration but cultivate peace. A life where enough truly becomes enough, and where every financial decision is made with a calm respect for the time you still have and an even deeper respect for the time you never will. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all, that money, in its most honest form, is not a measure of success, but a canvas upon which you paint the story of discipline, humility, patience, and identity. A canvas that, if you treat it wisely, becomes a sanctuary during chaos, a foundation during uncertainty, a whisper of reassurance during nights when fear knocks softly on the door of your thoughts. Because mastery over money is nothing more than mastery over yourself. And whoever learns to navigate the shifting landscapes of emotion eventually learns to navigate the shifting landscapes of wealth. And in the end, as you hold these truths quietly in your hands, you begin to see that the psychology of money is really the psychology of life itself, the life you are building, the future you are protecting, and the silent, powerful relationship between what you earn and who you become. A relationship that invites you to pause, breathe, and choose with intention before the world convinces you to chase illusions that disappear the moment you reach for them.